Greetings and welcome to my channel. This is Sorcerer Tal. You can also find me online at the Sorcerer's Guild as well as on Facebook at sorcerersguild.com. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this chat and put it a few places, give everyone a chance to get here before we start really talking. So let's go ahead and put a link on my Facebook here. Oh, that's the wrong link. That reminds me, last time someone asked me what a Luddite was when I referred to myself as a Luddite. Luddite originally is someone that was extremely against technology in general and actually went and smashed a bunch of stuff. Oh, that's my old altar is the thumbnail this time. That's a really old altar. That was a long time ago. But anyways, we'll put this in a few places. Anyone here yet? Am I still talking to my... Oh, yeah, it's three of us already. Okay. Let me just put a link in a few places real quick. Give some people a chance to join us. I noticed last time that I accidentally put some stupid... what do you call it? Limiter on the chat. That wasn't on purpose. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this link in the guild. Did I put one here or not? Yes. And then over in the guild. The Sorcerer's Guild. Okay. Yeah, that's a picture on there for the thumbnail. That is a really old altar. That's from a long time ago. Oh, that was a cool altar. I enjoyed that altar. Anyways, I hadn't developed much of a plan yet for today, other than we will read from the Anarchy's Last Stand, but we're going to say that for the last bit, so that those of you that don't want to hear it don't have to listen, because it'll be there. It'll be towards the end. We'll be live for an hour, just like normal. Okay, so this week's episode of Magical Theory was on breaking the fourth wall for fun and profit. Those of you that haven't seen it, it is the most recent video on my not live stuff. You think there'd be a better word for that, but I can't think of it. And my pre-recorded videos. And I'll go ahead and put a link in the chat here. Anybody that wants to see that. And that, like I said in the video, is exactly what you think it is. It's talking to the audience. And I think of that as A-U-D-I-A. Wow. A-U-D-I-A-N-T-S. For some reason, I went to stutter there at the end of that every time. So anyways, and that's the people that hear you. And that's just to keep it differentiated from the regular idea of an audience. Rather, it is the people that are listening to you in the cosmic idea. Essentially, it's the idea that we are a litany. Yeah, I've mentioned this before often with the law of aesthetics. The idea that we are carrying a story forward with each life and every moment of every life of every deed we ever do. And this story is our individual saga or litany story of what has come before us. This can be seen as a visual tell, a sound. It doesn't matter. It is all of these things. It is a tapestry which we weave with our thread from life to life. So if there's any questions anybody has on that, or I'm happy to answer any questions about that. Let's see, what else is going on? The water horse that I was talking about before, the boat, I actually did get a chance to test that, and it went well. Went pretty much like expected. It's not completed. Went in the, I guess you'd call it a memory of how that was supposed to be made. It pretty much went according to plan. Like when I saw it, I felt this memory involved of like, oh well, this is how I did that, and it turned out really well. And so far, it's went exactly according to plan. But I don't know if that really counts as verifying your personal gnosis. Simply that this tangent boat is similar to what we are. Well, that it worked the way that my mind said it would, because that's something that I mentioned before. Yeah, the brain is a lying bastard and cannot be trusted. So it likes to do these confirmation biases, and there'd be a lot of, well, yeah, I see this as a memory, but really what it is my brain put together that, oh, well, if you put this pipe with these other flotation devices on the side and a smaller amount of flotation in the front, that it's going to work like this. So it's very easy. It can be very easy that my brain simply came up with the idea and then presented it to me as a memory because I am starting to accept the programming of this larger part of me that came down from the bridge on May 5th. So even if it is my brain playing tricks, it does show that I am working in the right direction as far as the paradigm shift, if nothing else, because my brain is telling me that this is a memory from that other part of me, which means it's trying to complete the narrative and it's reaching in the right direction. So it doesn't really verify anything, the fact that the boat is working the way that I described, but it does provide some context with the idea that, well, like I said, that I'm going in that way. I don't know, we're not seeing a lot of people on here yet today. I was hoping for a little bit of question and answers to go along with this. Just a moment. Let's see. I did post it. Yeah, I already posted it in here. Okay, so let's see. Said I'd be on here for an hour, so better come up with something to talk about, I suppose. Some of the videos that we're going to be coming up with very soon is the material is magic that works from within the veil. The next volume of the Sorcerer's Shadow is going to be talking about that a lot. And magic that works from within the material realm is a bit different than the magic that works from the astral plane. The first book that we wrote, the first volume of the Sorcerer's Shadow, is primarily about magic that works from the astral plane, like your sigil work. Okay, that is magic that starts on the astral plane because you have, well, they're still going to follow the same model, but you have your intent, which starts mostly on the material plane, but then that is used to create the form, which is then molded onto which is created on the astral realm. You have your intent, which is your statement of intent, and that happens on the mental plane, and that information is moved onto the material plane as it condenses around itself into your form, which is created on the astral realm and then charged. And all of this is working through energy. So we're still working primarily on the energetic or astral realm. And then we release that sigil and it reaches out and from there goes out to manifest our desire. And so this is magic that is operating on the astral plane, because that form, as it moves about to manifest our desire, which is typically going to be on the material plane, so that's the part that is on the material plane still, but it's operating from the astral realm. Like it's going to affect the energy around a situation to get that final manifestation. So it's operating from the astral realm. Now, there's other types of spellcraft that operates differently. And that is, of course, we have the we call it psionic stuff that's working primarily on the mental plane and operating from there. But we're not going to be getting into that today. What we're talking about for at the moment is magic that is working on the energetic equivalent of the material realm. So we're not talking about like actually operating on the material plane. There's very little magic that operates there until you begin combining science. And really, that's where we're at with what I'm talking about here. And it's the in-between. Yeah, it's not quite the energetic plane. It's not quite the material realm. And the magic that operates there is the stuff that is most affected by things like quantum entanglement. There's quite a few of these spells that operate in this manner. In fact, even most of your jar spells, you're starting to get down to that. You're starting to work your way into that idea of stuff that works on the material plane because it gets so condensed in the bottle. But there's also a lot of momentum behind bottle work. And we'll get to that perhaps in a moment. But in the meantime, with the having a little bit of trouble keeping on track here. In the meantime, the material realm. Okay, sorry, got a little off track there. It's a little different when I'm live, I suppose, huh? Anyways, on the material realm, there is things like quantum entanglement that we are working with in that in-between space. Because essentially is the material realm, but it's in the minute. It's in the quantum field. In fact, that would probably be a good way to describe this type of magic is magic that is operating on the quantum realm. It's operating things like quantum entanglement. And these things are things such as, the most infamous is goofer dust. Goofer dust is very much one of these in-between things. And there's lots of people out there that talk about the recipe for goofer dust, but there is a very key ingredient that makes actual goofer dust. And I have yet to see anywhere where they've actually discussed that final ingredient. There's two of them. And a lot of people leave one or the other out. And the reason for that is because, it's a bioactive chemical agent. And those of us that do know the full formula, that's essentially telling someone how to make a bioactive chemical agent. But my point here, because I'm not going to give both of them, I will say that one of the things is burnt sulfur. The other one, shit, man, I don't know. If you can figure it out, I might be willing to tell you in person. But it's not the kind of thing. It's very dangerous working. And even if you're not directly, if you're directly putting it in someone, that's basically the same as poison. That's very much the same as poisoning someone. If you were like to blow actual goofer dust in somebody's face, because it will cause the nerves in the nerve sheathing in the back of your neck. It causes them to swell. Actually, I think I've mentioned this before, but Havana syndrome. If you want to know the symptoms of goofer dust, Havana syndrome. Look that up. Everyone thinks it's like some kind of sonic weapon. I almost guarantee that some practitioner in Cuba started with this with goofer dust. Okay, so it has that bioactive agent. To get back on track, the goofer dust has this bioactive agent that we begin the curse word from goofer dust with. And you don't actually necessarily need to get it completely on them. You simply need to get them associated with the goofer dust. And it's such a bad thing that through that, there's a little bit of that quantum entanglement, and through that potential, the potential that they almost came in contact with this stuff is enough to begin working energy that way. That unobserved potential that I've mentioned before, that is what they're playing on there. Yeah. Of course, if you could actually get the chemical on somebody, so much the better. But when we get that potential and we work from there up to it, you can actually cause the symptoms of the goofer dust to someone that never actually came in contact with it, simply because of the unobserved potential of, well, they almost came into contact with it, and you work your way through that. It's for momentum with just how bad this stuff actually is. Okay, so one that I will talk about completely, besides the goofer dust, is the war water. And this one, I mean, this is pretty significant as well. And it's another one that's working off of quantum entanglement and that quantum field, that smallest, minute particles within the material plane, just on the edge. Yeah. And the way war water works. I mean, there's lots of different traditions about creating the war water. What war water is you take water and you soak it in iron nails until it rusts, and you get this irony water. And it's essentially a early version of synthetic blood. But you can take this, pour it on your enemy's porch, and it will harm their home. It will curse their household, stuff like that. There's a lot of things to do with war water, and those are working. Well, you're still on that verge, but more on the astral side of it. The truly brutal things that can be done with war water is when you really work that quantum entanglement angle into it. And what can be done there is you've already got irony liquid. Now the trick here, and not everything can be done. That's the thing about this, though. Not everything that could be done with war water is necessarily brutal, but you can affect a person's blood. Okay, so you get the rusty water from the iron nails. It's best with stuff like this. It's best to stick with the traditional rules as best as you can, because you never know what little piece it is that is needed. Because the rules are much more specific when you're dealing in this area than they are with like sigil work, candle magic, things where you're operating primarily from the astral plane. You're much closer to intent, and there's less momentum involved, essentially. There's less momentum shoving you in a particular direction when you're working with astral or mental planes than there is when you're working on the quantum level or the beginnings of the material plane. And so, anyways, you need to create that quantum entanglement. So, what you do is you need an actual sample, yeah? You can't just imagine the person at the war water to get this full effect. You need like fingernail clippings, hair, something of that nature, something with their actual DNA, because you're looking for actual quantum entanglement here. But anyways, once you have acquired the sample, you can then place it in the war water, and over time, as their DNA becomes saturated into that rusty water, it creates a synthetic or symbolic version of their blood. And then through this, anything that you then add to that war water in a witch bottle or anything like that will begin affecting the current of that person's bloodstream. So, like I said, this isn't necessarily something that you have to do something bad with. I suppose if you wanted to, you could do medicinal work this way, in fact, that's an interesting idea. We might be looking into that in the future. Like perhaps this would be a way to apply extra antibiotics or health to someone's body. Because according to what I was taught with this, you can do anything to affect the person's blood. I have tested this to some extent. I haven't tried healing with it, to be completely honest. My workings have been of a different nature when I work out with war water. Well, it is called war water, so that is what one thinks of most immediately, yeah, is issues of conflict. Anyways, so is there any questions about any of this stuff that we said so far? Let's see. Okay, what else have we? Along those same lines, we're going to be testing that idea in the next little while. One of the videos I will be coming out soon, with soon, is about how to ward off insects with a half-pilled orange. And yes, that sounds a little gimmicky for those of you that are in CMG, but there actually is legitimate idea that we're working from in the first place, and that is the citrus from the orange. If you then take that and place full cloves into the orange and it draws the citrus into the clove and out, it actually creates a chemical that is already why can't I think of the word? Not an insecticide. Anyways, it's a chemical that keeps bugs away. And when we're going to see if we can work with that. So that would be an experiment that we will be doing over the summer. I've been waiting for the bugs to get worse. Sadly, it does not seem like that is going to happen. I know that seems a weird thing to say. Hi, Tiffany. But yeah, there hasn't been hardly any bugs around. I've been waiting for the bugs to get bad, and it just hasn't happened, which is fairly concerning, really, because well, that's a large part of the ecological food chain is all the little bugs in the air. That's what the fish eat. That's what all the smaller bugs eat, that the birds eat. Some of the birds eat those small bugs. It's an important niche in the food chain. And it's a little concerning that it's going. But anyways, I'm not on here today to talk about the impending environmental collapse or anything like that. You never know. We're liable to get to that at some point, but if we're going to talk about that, I'd much rather have a planned discussion than just coming on like I have. Let's see. We're 22 minutes in. I don't think we should start reading the book yet. Like I said, I think we will keep that till the end. We are going to start the actual novel today when we get to that. Speaking of books, Sorcerer's Shadow Volume 2, I am working on it. It has been quite the work in progress. I think I've been promising it for about 2 years now, but I am working on it. I actually have been the whole time. There's a lot that goes into these short essays. I realize that most of the essays, even in Sorcerer's Shadow Volume 1, quite a few of them are only a couple pages long or even shorter. But there's been a lot of thought that goes into those before I actually write. I spend a lot of time thinking, and then I'll write, and then I think again, and then I write. And for this one, and I am glad I waited, because I have a lot more to say about a lot of these concepts. For Volume 2, the closer we got to May 5th of 2022, that 10-year mark, I decided, well, I should wait and see what the other aspect of me has to say about it. Well, I didn't know exactly what it was, but I figured I should wait because I knew that for sure that in some ways I would know more then. So after that is the proper time to write this Volume 2, because I do have a bit more insight into a few things. Like I said, this one is going to focus more on your lower magic, which is what I call stuff working on the quantum field, operating from in between the veil. I consider that low magic, not from any like snobbery standpoint or anything like that, but more from the point of it is closer to us. It is stuff that's operating on the energetic equivalent of the material plane, or the quantum field, as we have decided to coin it during this live video. So that, I think, that's definitely the best word for it, by the way, is the quantum field. Like I said, that place where energy condenses into matter, where you get your small little things, the very beginnings of the conversion from the astral to the material plane. What the Hadron Collider is looking for. Okay, so, anyways, I don't have a lot more to say, so I'm just going to go ahead and get into the book. We'll go ahead and read that. Seems like people haven't been quite as excited for this, but that's okay. We're going to keep going. It'll matter someday, at least to me. The Fayrune Saga, Book 1, A Trail of Footprints. Now, this one is written from the in a more narrative stance, as opposed to all the ones before this that were mostly written from a first-person perspective. Anyways, Book 1, A Trail of Footprints. Azriam, the Will Taker's purple eyes gazed out over the western windows of his black tower, watching the sun set against the light lavender waves of the sacred ocean. The bright reds and subtle bluish greens of the sunset were marred by angry slashes of sickly gray produced when rays of light from the sun encountered questing tentacles of the inky black necromantic sludge that had made its way free of the dark harbor in his city of Murkport. Tonight, even the sight of his creation making its power known over the sunset did not please him. Most evenings, he would sit and watch as the dark tendrils of undead slime slithered its way on its journey to seek out the living creatures of the sea and drain their essence to feed his undead creations. Tonight, the rhythmic lapping of the waves across the rotting sludge on its dark mission did not comfort him. Somehow, the movement of the waves seemed almost ominous, as if the ocean's water were fighting back against the undead sludge. His gaze followed the waves westwards, out towards the sea. Why did he think of the slave girl now? The strange beast child he had purchased earlier that week, completely untamable, he thought to himself. He had been told from the slave driver that she had come from lands far to the west. He had paid very little for the creature. He felt that was the best way to think of the primitive thing. He bought the creature out of curiosity, even tried to communicate with it, and though it seemed to understand every word he spoke, it did not seem capable of speech in any known language. Every time he came near the cage in which she was housed, she would scratch and bite. It appeared to be a teenage girl, with teeth like a dog. Her ears were pointed like the elves of ancient legends. Green eyes appeared intelligent, but she moved like a beast. Two of her toes even seemed to have retractable talons like a hunting cat, but only on one foot. A hybrid between a human species and some sort of sapient monster, perhaps? Azriam pondered. Of the two, her actions resembled more that of the dog. She would snarl and bark. She even howled like a wolf when he finally walked away. Utterly useless, but an interesting specimen for his zoo. He had left Azul with instructions to send her there in the morning. Azriam's pale purple eyes once again gazed westwards, out into the sacred ocean. He felt as if the setting sun were looking back at him unkindly. The tracks. Okay, so now we skip. So now it's got some asterisks, and we skip to the next part. The tracks ended at the beach. If Petra had still been alive, he would have gotten there sooner. She had always been a better tracker than him. No use dwelling on that now, Coda chided himself. A Fayrune cub had been taken, a cub from Coda's own coven. The girl was barely 14 cycles, a mere cub. Coda had been tracking the girl for 2 days when her trail was joined by the flat-tipped, hard-heeled boots of 7 human pairs of hobnailed boots. The 7 pairs of boots joined the cubs in a small copse of trees near the edge of the beach, where a hastily constructed mat of leaves and a small cooking fire suggested the cub had bedded down for the night. The tracks showed boots hills braced in deep, taking a wide stance, a common tactic among human fighters. The cub track showed bare feet, 2 talons on her right foot extended, leaving long gouges in the sand where she had spun back and forth between the other 7 tracks. Red dotted the sand in several places, and even Coda's nose, could smell the irony scent of human blood in the air. The cub had fought hard, but in the end, the 7 pairs of hobnailed human boots led back down to the beach, and the cub's tracks disappeared. Following the tracks of the human's boots, Kodas found 2 long indents that trailed through the beach sand, the tracks of a small seafaring human rowboat being dragged back into the ocean waves, most likely to a larger ship waiting out in the deeper water. Kodas stared out across the waves and waited for the cub's return for 2 days before he left. By now, he had been traveling for another 3. His home coven was only 2 days' walk from here, where the child had been abducted, but it would be another day before he reached his destination. The tracks left by the 7 boots and the style of the boot in which they traveled was clearly human, but was more closely related to the older style of men. For 7 generations, the Fayrune hordes and human races of Meadow Valley had lived in relative harmony. This had had a profound effect on both cultures. Most importantly for the moment, the humans of Meadow Valley had ceased to wear the hobnailed, iron-shod boots they had previously worn, in favor of boots made with the harder yet more flexible, fine-pressed bone leather composite soles that the Fayrune favored. Their boats also had been affected by Fayrune design, and left a very different and less deep trail when dragged through the sand of the beach. No, these tracks were from a race of men who had not yet encountered the Fayrune horde, and that meant those tracks came from somewhere very, very far away. Koda had not headed home, because he knew the answers to his questions were not hidden there. The only way he knew to discover where the girl had been taken lay another day's walk to the south, and Koda did not wish to go. Quick Fingers was what they had called the girl, being as she had not yet earned a name of her own. The girl was not Koda's offspring, rather the offspring of his coven mates, Carrie and Rachio. In a Fayrune coven, this makes little difference. All love is shared. It was simply a matter of chance that Koda himself had not sired the cub. A Fayrune child from Koda's coven was missing, and Koda was determined to find her. Or, if she had been killed, rain down the fury of the horde upon those who had harmed her. And so, to the south, he walked alone. How long have we been on? Half an hour. Okay. Tonight, the pungent white smoke that lazily curled itself about in Jeshua Witterson's study held little comfort. Oh, sorry. There's an asterisk, and then we start another scene. Tonight, the pungent white smoke that lazily curled itself about in Jeshua Witterson's study held little comfort. Tonight, his pipe held no sanctuary. A gray sludge tainted his usually pleasant musings. Old, gnarled fingers grasped the dark wood stem and marble stone of the wizard's long pipe. His breath drew in deeply, and he thought to himself, perhaps one more long puff in the herbal smoke will purify the solemn grayness and bring back the dancing maelstrom of lights and swirling colors that usually accompanied his idle thoughts. He had already waited too long. He was sure of it. The small gray speck had been growing for years, while he sat idle. The gray wrongness had grown huge. The ancient wizard's eyes gazed lazily to the east. Still time, he thought, his old wrinkled eyelids gently closing over his odd opal-colored eyes. Still time, he said, as his head nodded deep into his long white beard. Still time, he mumbled, one last time, as he finally gave way to sleep. His dreams were tinged with undead gray sludge in the echoes of a ticking clock. We're going to keep going for a bit. So on to the next scene. The tower was not so much silver as it was iridescent, surrounded by 7 circles forming a spiral leading outwards from the tower. The 7 concentric circles were formed from an enchanted hedge with long red leaves. The long red leaves of the hedge seemed harmless enough. When dealing with Jeshua Wittershins, there was no guarantee of their nature. Koda couldn't help but think of Petra, now so close to the tower, where so many of their adventures had begun. The time of mourning had come and gone. Koda reminded himself to concentrate now. Long ago, and then there's kind of a skip. We're going to, Long ago, the mad old wizard had grown wary of disturbances in his tower sanctuary, so he had constructed a new tower on the isolated stretch of the Minnegichi River. As soon as the tower's location had been discovered, however, Jeshel Wittershins had a constant stream of challengers, would-be apprentices, and people seeking favors, for a total of 2 or 3 every couple of years. To avoid these constant disturbances, Jeshel Wittershins had grown the hedge. The hedge was less of a plant and more of a living spell, attached to the mad, often inebriated, senile old wizard's constantly changing whims. At the moment, the hedgerow lay open, though the long red leaves seemed wilted and slightly lethargic, and just a shade away from their usual lustrous red. Coda had been here many times, never before without Petra. She could read the mood of the leaves. Without her, Coda had no idea if the hedge was safe. Gonna have to take my chances, Coda said out loud to himself as he stepped into the hedge. Someone, asterisk again, someone has entered the garden. Jeshel Wittershin's wizened old eyelids struggled to open. The creature that sat before him looked like, and was primarily composed of green pond scum and liquid gold. He called the creature hen toad, though it bore much less resemblance to a hen than it did the toad. Jeshel Wittershins opened his eyes fully and waved his hand, dispersing the strange creature back to its watery home in the nether trenches of the tower, and walked towards the window. There was indeed someone entering the hedge, a Fayrune warrior by the looks of it. Jeshel Wittershins pinched his forefinger and thumb together and gazed into the circle created by his hand. This face was familiar, but something was missing, some key detail. A trick? He asked himself aloud. Not likely. There is no spell associated with the figure, or the hedge would have reacted to its presence. He answered himself also out loud. The face was familiar. Long, brown hair with pointed ears, and the teeth of the Fayrune, the common yellow eyes of his people. Coda. The Fayrune's name is Coda, Jeshel thought. Yes, I have seen the boy on many errands throughout the years. But if this is Coda, where is Petra? The old wizard wondered to himself. Just then he remembered he had heard rumors. Best not to bring up the subject, the old wizard thought to himself. If any of those rumors are true, the lad must be crushed. The old wizard dropped the spell and closed his hands. Jeshel Wittershins wondered idly what brought the lad to his tower as he struck a small, wooden-handled striker against an ornate brass gong anchored on his desk, and a slimy, golden-hued creature appeared. Hentoad, the person who entered the garden is known to us. Call him the Hedge, and I'll prepare myself for his arrival. The old wizard drew a long, multicolored cloth from his closet and began wrapping it around his body as a robe. The fabric was enchanted so that the colors reflected the background energy of the planet. As he arranged the material, Jeshel Wittershins noted the gray stain had grown larger. Okay, we'll keep going for just a little bit more. We're going to finish the part with Coda and Jeshel Wittershins, and then we'll leave off for the day. If that isn't an hour, we'll go back to talking for a bit, I suppose. Coda walked the 7 spiral rows of the hedge, eyeing the blood-red leaves uneasily. Petra was no longer with him to warn if the hedge's mood suddenly changed. So far, the hedge seemed calm, but he had never before come here unannounced, and even then, a few times, there had been problems. Coda's pointed Fayrune ears twitched at the sound of every hedge leaf that brushed in the faint southerly wind, skittering old dried leaves and revealing small crawling creatures. Coda's nose twitched, trying to catch the scent of the hedge. Strong though his nose was compared to most humanoid species, he could not smell emotion, unlike Petra. Finally, Coda circled around the 7 spiraled rows of the hedge and strode towards the door. Up close, the tower was hard to look at. A bright, silvery, iridescent assault to the eyes, in the extreme myriad of colors of which the mortal mind was never intended to conceive. Coda had never been able to grow accustomed to the sudden assault on his senses, and instead focused his eyes on the door, which was simply black and white at the same time, but never gray. When he knocked on the door, he was greeted by another strange sight, of which he had never been able to grow accustomed. The liquid gold and green slimy lump that was Hentoad. "What do you want now?" the golden slime croaked in its gravelly yet wet voice. "Hentoad, it is nice to see you again as well," Coda replied, trying not to breathe. The smell of the strange creature was another assault on the senses, which Coda had never quite gotten used to. "I suppose you'll be wanting to see him then," Hentoad said. "No one ever comes to see me." "If you joined a circus, people would stand in line every day just to catch a glimpse of you," Coda replied. A broad smile crept across Hentoad's wide frog-like mouth. "I just bet they would. I could see humans and elves, maybe even a dwarf. They never come to the tower, dwarfs. All they ever see are Fayrune and wizards. I mean, wizards come in all kinds of races, but still all the same, all magic and boring spells and whatnot. The only other people I see are all adventurers, scholars, and witch doctors. I want to meet something different, like a farmer or a blacksmith, maybe a tailor. Something normal and interesting like that." Hentoad's rant was cut short as Jeshel Wittershins appeared at the top of the stairs. "Hey, Jeshel!" the lump of slime and liquid gold yelled excitedly as he noticed Jeshel Wittershins' arrival at the top of the stairs. "Coda says I should join the circus, and then all kinds of interesting normal people would come see me." Jeshel Wittershins shook his head slightly, the corners of his wrinkled mouth edging towards a grimace as he walked down the stairs. "You know full well it will be at least another 600 years before you are well formed enough to leave the tower grounds unattended. Without me following behind you, casting maintenance spells on you every couple hours, you would disperse into your base variables before you made it 100 yards from the tower grounds. And then what would you be? Just a pile of pond algae, a heavy stack of gold, and a few bits of old toad bones and eggshells." Could have sworn I could silent and everything. Anyways, Hentoad turned away disappointedly, a small fart bubbling out of the liquid gold and slime of his backside just before he disappeared from the room, teleporting himself back to his watery lair underneath the tower. Jeshel Wittershins' wrinkled old face turned from a slight grimace to a smile as he turned towards the Fayrune. "Ah, Coda, it's good to see you, even if it is unannounced. I have a thing I need someone to look into. Perhaps you and... But Coda, my boy, where is your dog?" It had been 6 months since Petra's death. Perhaps watching her finally grow old had been harder. Coda and the dog had been together for 23 cycles, an admittedly long lifespan for a dog. Even though Fayrune's hounds were known for their exceptional lifespan, as well as high intelligence and hunting prowess, Petra had been Coda's best friend and closest ally since he was 10 cycles. And the pup had crawled out of her mother's den and began since 10 cycles when the pup had crawled out of her mother's den and began following the boy, then known as Odd, about his home coven. He had named her Petra because her fur was the color of dull red sandstone, with black lines tracing through it. Petra's light brindle coloration not only gave her a unique look, but also provided her with a camouflage coat, which allowed her to sneak through the underbrush, unseen, and slowly herd game animals towards Coda's waiting crossbow, and then flushing the animals directly into his line of fire. On Coda's 15th cycle, he chose to attend the guild gathering, not to join a guild and seek his name through training in a craft or skill, but to declare his intention to go guildless. He had come to this decision 2 years prior while hunting rabbits with Petra. He decided this not because he lacked any skills or talents, nor did he resent the responsibilities that come with membership in a guild. There was a reason that his home coven had chosen to call him Odd. He never quite fit. Coda wasn't an outcast. He had been treated quite well in his home coven, and fared well amongst the other cubs. In fact, Coda had been the first of the 7 cubs in his litter for his baby fur to begin falling out at the young age of 12. Perhaps Coda had too many interests to choose one guild. He wanted to hunt, he wanted to sail ships and go on adventures and paint and learn to make gedge and just do everything he could before having to go through the long cycle known as death and be reborn. He felt as if he had maybe already lived all of those lives. Coda wanted to try something different. So in the year of his 15th cycle, the child known as Odd, still a bit of fur left on his chest, went to the guild gathering and stood for his first time before the council and announced his intentions to become guildless. Becoming guildless was not a shameful act, only rare. In fact, several heroes of the Horde had been guildless and lived lives that furthered the glory of the Horde. Few who knew him were surprised by his decision. And so it was that Odd and Petra went forth into the world and lived a life that would further the glory of the Horde, eventually earning him the name Coda, a word in one of the Fayrune's many ancient tongues, a word that means dog, in honor of the pivotal role which Petra played in Coda's many acts of bravery and valor in the name of the Horde. Coda owed both his name and his reputation to Petra, so when the dog grew old, Coda felt that she deserved to be allowed to live out her waning years in comfort. So less than a cycle ago, Coda had returned to the Horde and joined a home coven near where he and Petra had been born. It took 2 months before Petra decided that Coda was staying put. It took 2 months before Petra decided that Coda was staying put and began wandering off in search of adventure on her own. In the end, it was a Skylax that had taken Petra from Coda. The large, six-legged herbivore would not have been a match for Petra in her prime, despite the large pincers on its first 2 legs and large mandibles. But Petra had grown old. Coda came across the scene as both the six-legged beast and Petra lay dying. In each other's embrace, they lay dying in each other's death embrace. 2 of the Skylax's massive pincers folded half closed to Petra's torso, her ivory white teeth filling with ruby red blood as she struggled with her last breath to close her teeth around the Skylax's massive throat. Coda killed the Skylax quickly, but Petra's wounds were too deep, and in those last few moments, Coda's best friend died in his arms, licking his face one last time as she passed away. Coda had always known that Petra would die before him. He had been prepared for her death, but not like this. Coda could not forgive himself for allowing the dog to wander off on her own. He felt as if he had betrayed his dog. He should have been there. He never should have tried to settle down. He felt responsible for Petra's death. Okay, so that's where we're going to end that for today. That's long enough reading on the thing. We will pick that up next Saturday, and I'm going to make sure that we keep those in parts. We'll probably start reading a little bit later into the episode, because I did want to leave that for the last thing. We've got like 13 minutes left before we hit the full hour. 10 kangaroos versus 1 lion fight to the death. Who would win? I don't know. Anyways, let's see. What else is there to talk about? As you can see, it's a bit messy over here. What else is there? I noticed that the subscriber count actually went up and stayed up during the reading this time, though. So maybe now that we're into the actual novel itself, now that's going to continue for a few chapters up to a point, and then that will cut off and be in the next book. And after that, will be a couple more short stories, and then we're going to get into some poems and essays. The essays will be a little more like what you're familiar with on this channel, because it'll be, well, essays. We'll be mostly talking about magic or philosophical things at that time. One of them is about the problematic nature of monotheism. So that one will be a little controversial. And that's also something else I've been thinking about all week, that I've been debating myself with what I was going to say on here or not. But like I said, I'm going to try and keep out of politics for the most part. But there's a lot of stuff going on that's concerning for practitioners in this world. Yeah, there's a lot of people going out there doing a satanic panic again in different ways. And we need to keep tabs on this stuff. We do not need to go back to where we were even as when I was a kid. When I was a teenager, I got harassed at my school by the, we had like a policeman that was like at the school. I mean, this guy followed me around all day, every day, primarily because I was a known spell user. I actually had to have someone come up. Actually, my dad actually wound up going up to the police department and yelling at them to leave me alone for harassment. And that's when, well, he started backing off some. But there was a lot of this going on at my school. They actually, well, this sounds overblown. I mean, and we were, I can't say we weren't teenagers. Yeah, we weren't teenagers acting a little bit crazy, but they actually brought in a gang task force at one point, changed a bunch of rules about colors of people's hair and stuff. And this was all because of they thought we were some kind of like gang of witches. All because we were just being witches. We weren't really hurting anybody or anything. We did have one person think that we were doing stuff to them and go and tell the principal, and that got pretty wild. But we didn't ever actually did anything in all of that. And that's my point. We can't let things go back to that. Yeah. We need to find a way to keep tabs on this, keep some kind of way with a good PR in the community. But at the same time, we need to be made much more visible. That's a big part of it. It isn't, I'm not saying, oh, we got to go kiss their butts. Okay. We want to keep good PR. And by that, I mean, we want people to know who we are. We want to keep things out, and we want to be out in the open the best we can. And I realize I can't be with all of us. Yeah. A lot of us are still in the broom closet. We have to stay there, witches, sorcerers, whatever you want to call yourselves. That's something that I'm going to get into here soon. Maybe a little bit today. Yeah, why not? Is that word, witch. Yeah. The idea of it being associated with Wiccans is a very recent thing. And it's not always the same word, but there is a thing. Yeah. When people believed Taltos is a word that is actually more accurate, but witch in its original combination was one of those things. What are my thoughts on spiritual contracts? Get to that in just a moment. But there is when people got rid of their when people killed their twins because they were afraid they were going to be witches, murdered twins, things like that, it is not because they thought they were going to be born wicked. Yeah, it's not because they thought there was some religion that they were somehow going to be a part of. Wiccan essentially means midwife. And don't get me wrong, it's an important tradition, and it's an original thing, and even modern day Wicca. Very cool. I'm not against it, not trying to bash the path in any way. But this word witch, and the other words associated with it, is about those that are born different. Those born with 6 fingers, things like that. But we'll get into that more in a later episode because we do have a question here. My thoughts on spiritual contracts. Well, depends on what we mean by that. If you mean like selling your soul, that's what you mean by a spiritual contract. I actually do have a video talking a little bit about some of that sort of stuff. A lot of people say that's totally bogus. One cannot sell their soul or trade their soul. There are ways. There are beings that are interested in these things. But it's not your higher self, your actual soul that they're interested in. They're interested in the leftover, that Ka that I've talked about in many videos, the part that we can inflate to make Ka spirits to help us with projects from the dead. They're interested in that. They're interested in rights to it, either to be consumed or to be used. Oh, you want to make a servitor? You know what, Charles? I went through a process like that. Do you need to? No. Can you? Will it help you? It helps me. I actually, I spent quite a bit of my youth being, I like to use the word groomed to be a Baptist missionary. I was at the same time also learning the Manitou stuff from my dad, but I was allowed to do both because I became fascinated with Christianity. And, well, there was this Awanas thing, and they had cool little uniforms you could wear, and they praised me for being able to remember all these verses. Anyways, that's not the point. I was there for years, and I took it quite seriously. And I eventually realized I couldn't be both these things at once, which is really a foregone conclusion to me. Other people, there's Christian witches all over the place. So, no, you don't even necessarily have to give up Catholicism. For me, I actually did workup meditation and imagining myself plucking myself back out of God's hand because I needed that. Yeah, I needed something. I needed some kind of catharsis to feel that I had been free of that because I think the best word is betrayed. When I truly understood what was going on with the church. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing wrong. I have nothing against Christians. I've never met one. I was Baptist for a very long time. I've never met a Christian. Uh, that's maybe a controversial thing to say, but if you read the Bible and in the way that people behave. But like I said, I'm not going to get into politics, except for that I'm just going to go ahead and say that these people were warning me about the beast, the coming of the beast, all these signs to watch for the beast. And I still know some of these people, yeah. And it freaks me out a little bit that we've got this guy that, well, mark of the beast upon their forehead, brought the embassy back to Jerusalem. I'm not saying anybody's anything. I don't believe that that person is the beast. But all these people that warned me about these warning signs, and then when they get here, somebody portraying a warning sign, they don't follow him. I don't know what to say about that. Except for that I was right to stop being involved with them. I was right to stop being involved with that, right? That's what I have to say about that. But I'm not actually saying that, well, I don't believe in Christianity at all. So obviously I don't believe anybody is the beast or there's any antichrist coming, anything like that. But to answer the question one last time, Charles, it provided me catharsis. If you want to imagine yourself removing that contract, but it also provides catharsis in that when you go up there and interact, and this is going to be a very controversial statement as well, but when you go up and interact with that Christian God and find that it is very much affected by what you believe at it, you can believe it into doing things and realize that that Christian God is itself a servitor or tulpa. It is a created being that is dependent on your will. Well, that tells you a lot about Christianity, and it makes it a lot easier to remove yourself from it. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I might as well go ahead and start talking about a little more openly about my feelings of that, because we're going to hit an essay on these live channels talking about why monotheism is problematic and why, if that God exists, what the potential all the potential answers are for a being that would behave the way that one does. But like I said, I've interacted with it myself, and it's a tulpa, right? That is not a real being. That is created. You go up there, you're going to interact with something that is not real, something that has been made by man and is quite simply parasitic to man. A lot of part of the reason why we are so far back in our progress. Anyways, that's enough of that for this episode. I do try to avoid the path bashing, but here we are. Anyways, I really appreciate those of you that have stuck around with me for the full hour. I hope you enjoyed yourself as much as I have. We'll be doing this again next week. Pre-recorded episodes throughout the week. But until next time, bright blessings. and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tell.